And do you try to identify those early and use them as a...
Yes.
Okay.
So you have to look out among the class and find the students with the good tells,
Okay.
so that you can spot when there's some level of misunderstanding. And then a level of misunderstanding is also an opportunity to become a little more human. Because you say, okay, well, that didn't work. Obviously, I wasn't very clear. Let me try that again. And then try something new. The process of doing this is also very interactive because it encourages questions from students. Now, in addition to them asking you questions as a reminder, you can use questions as a diagnostic. So,
do you use clickers at all?
I typically don't use clickers because I ask too many questions.
Okay.
I'll ask 4 questions in 5 minutes.
Okay.
And typically, I like to ask questions that at this point, the students should know, based upon what I've said. Now, why is that? Well, that's a diagnostic because I'm measuring what I said previously. And that's one of these great opportunities for the students to have this, I'm ahead of the game, feeling.
And you're expecting individual students in a setting of 700 students to answer your questions?
Oh, well, frequently, and I don't know how I do it with body language or something, frequently it's just sort of shout back the answer to me, and sometimes, if I don't get that, there'll be a pause. And then in the case of a pause, you know, I'll wait for hands, or I'll modify the question, or whatever's necessary to try to get through it, but that's an interesting opportunity, because it's an observation that we reached a disconnect. And the reason I want to ask these questions so frequently is if 20 minutes in I find we've reached a disconnect, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to fix 20 minutes worth of lecture. As opposed to I need to fix the last few minutes worth of lecture because something didn't go across. So asking frequently and then occasionally in these moments when something didn't go across and you try something else, and even some students will volunteer to help you. They'll either help you by saying, does that mean this? Wow, that's a really good way to explain it. Or could I think of it in this other way? And interactively, you can actually develop a better explanation than you had previously. And so over the years, I've sort of collected up inside my head the list of the seemingly best explanations of each topic just by trial and error, having seen some of them that work and some of them that don't work, and narrowing it down, changing completely how I teach simple harmonic motion, because that one didn't work for 2 years. For 2 years, I was teaching it as the book taught it, and it wasn't working. And I wasn't getting through, and I didn't know why. And then at some point, and this was actually in office hours discussing with a student, I recouched it instead of an energy problem into a kinematics problem. It was clear. And the student could then work problems very well. And now I teach simple harmonic motion from a viewpoint of kinematics, which is not in the book, but it works. So you have to try these things. I realize that, you know, at least I would hope after 19 years I'm better than I was as an incoming professor in 1990. But clearly, if you pay attention, the students will teach you what is effective. So that's what I try to do.
Now, when we look at studies about students' attention span, they say the students can pay attention the first 10, 15 minutes of the lecture, or of some activity. They tend to fall asleep then, and then they sort of come awake refreshed. So they actually sort of catch, if you have a 50-minute lecture, they catch the beginning, they miss the middle, and they catch the end in terms of attention. Have you found that to be true? If so, how do you adjust for that?
Almost every process, when you break it down into subsets, has this beginning, middle, end feature, even a semester. People tend to slack off coming into the midterm in the middle of the semester, and then they energize themselves for the final, just as during an hour-long period. And you can combat that a little bit by continually reminding the student as the topic changes. In an hour-long lecture, sometimes you've got a single topic, and that's going to be a tough lecture. Other times you may have several topics. And if during the process of the lecture you've made it clear that you've begun, are in the middle of, and finished topic 1, then topic 2, then topic 3, you can get them refreshed a few more times through the lecture. Or you can break it up with some of the other techniques we discussed earlier, or you can call upon the nuclear option.
Which is?
Which is you threaten the students.
No.
Really nicely. You turn to the board and you say, you know, I gave a really interesting problem on this topic on last year's final exam. And you write down the topic. And then as soon as that kind of a phrase, final exam, midterm exam, I gave a problem on this in the past, comes out, they will suddenly reset their clock. Because this is now a new opportunity. This is a change. You had your lecture going on. It was communication of information about so-and-so subject. Now it's communication about what might be on my exam. And so you can sort of sprinkle in these refreshers, if you will.
Okay. So is there anything you haven't done that you'd like to try? Or what are the next steps?
I've been recently using the Echo 360 system, and I like that very much, and I love your suggestion about moving through the classroom, and I'm going to use that.
Echo 360 is our in-class recording system that just automatically records the entire lecture for you.
Yes, and students have given me tremendous feedback on that. My fear, starting into that system, was that this is a mechanism by which lecture doesn't need to be attended anymore, and that student attendance would go down, went down a little bit, and that they would only view the recordings. My recordings are not as good as live because I don't get to look at you and get feedback of how it's going and adjust it. So I was afraid of that. And at the end of the semester, we took a survey of how the students were using it. And as it turns out, most of them were going to the lecture and then using the recording as a refresher and even reviewing it several times if they found a particular topic difficult. So I'd like to do more of that, and I'm curious about a friend of mine was contacted from physicists in India with the following question. Could you teach 1 million students at once? Wow, that's kind of interesting. And when he relayed that question to me, Tom, could you teach 1 million students at once? My answer was that our lecture hall is obviously not big enough. However, it brings up a question of, can these techniques be expanded and how far? Right. And when you lose the human contact, can technology bring that back with video conferencing, or can't it? Will it become impersonal even though a particular student's face can appear to ask you a question? I don't know, but I'd love to learn. What's
the largest class you think currently you could do face-to-face? And still keep all that attention? And
I think I could do every seat in Javits 100.
Which is 580.
Which is, yeah, exactly. And that wouldn't be a problem. I think Javits 100 is particularly nicely laid out by having a balcony that brings students physically closer in order to reach that, that number 580. And in fact, with my big mouth and loud voice, I used to lecture in Javits without a microphone. Yeah, I felt that I was making reasonably personal contacts in that room. Couple thousand, and I think it might be a different game. And I'd be interested to find out, because basically, like I said, the students would teach me.
Okay. Well, Tom, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
All right. If you have any questions for Tom, you can post them on our blog on the TLT website at tlt.stonybrook.edu, where he'll respond to your questions. I'm Graham Glynn. I hope you'll join me for another exciting episode of Innovations in Education.